Alon, thank you so very much for being with us. May I call you Alon for the purposes of this interview, first of all?
With a pleasure, it's okay, yeah.
Wonderful. So I wanted to begin by something that the Colonel mentioned in the introduction, namely that you rose to the position of Deputy Commissioner of the Israeli National Police, but your professional career did not begin there. You did not begin in the police force. It actually began in the Israeli military, specifically in the Israeli Air Force. Tell us about, if you would, something of your service in the Air Force, especially given that we're in front of faculty at the US Air Force Academy. Tell us something about your service in the Air Force and how that experience and ethos prepared you for leadership when you transitioned into the Israeli National Police, as well as how it prepared you as a member of your community, and also, if you don't mind, as a family man.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you all for having me here today. And it's really a privilege and an honor to speak to you, even it's in this strange platform that we call Zoom. I wish to be there in the United States talking to you, but maybe in a few months it will be possible. With your permission, I prepared some keynotes here. So if I'll lower my eyes to the paper, please excuse me. First, I remember the day I stood on the ceremonial field somewhere in the Israeli Air Force Base in the south, in Hatzerim, in the Negev, and getting my flight wings on my chest. It was an enormous moment. It was so excited. The family was there. Everybody was there cheering. The airplanes just flew above in the sky. It was an unbelievable moment. It was after a very long 2 years of difficult course, and it was over. I just started to serve as an operational pilot in the Israeli Air Force. I just want to mention that the Israeli course, the flight course is 6 stages. It lasts for 2 years, very long 2 years. And I ended the 2 stages as outstanding trainee, but I have to mention that these 2 stages were not those that the emphasis was flying, but it was those that the emphasis was on leadership and command. So it will be maybe remember that for the ongoing conversation. I want to share with you a few moments or few examples from my long service in the Israeli Air Force, and I think I picked just 2 issues to talk about that maybe emphasize leadership and command and things that are important to this conversation, maybe to young cadets in the academy. The Israeli Air Force educates his pilot to be first officers and commanders, and second to be pilots. Anyone who is a great pilot and he has no commanding or leadership capabilities, he will not finish the course. He can be a great pilot, but he cannot be a commander. That's not good enough for the Israeli Air Force. We are being checked all the time. We are measured by our decision-making abilities and our integrity. You have to be very correct, very specific, your integrity must be very high. At the end of the course, I was assigned as a combat helicopter pilot in small helicopters, attack helicopters. It's called the MD-500. And at that time, there was a high security tension on the border with Lebanon. I believe, Benjamin, you remember these years, and I know that you also served as a soldier in the northern border, along the northern border of Israel. So one day, the whole squadron was on a train, flying training in the Golan Heights in the north of the country, and something like 15 helicopters were on the Golan Heights, and I stayed in the squadron as to to take care of the things in the back. The squadron commander was on the Golan Heights. Everybody was there. The squadron was almost empty. I just want to remind you all that I was something like 22, 23 years old, which I'm almost doubled now, but we don't want to talk about that now. Suddenly the phone rang, and on the other end, in the operation room, and I was instructed to prepare an attack on a house in Lebanon, a house which terrorists just left the day before to attack a village on the northern border of Israel. I tried to reach the squadron commander, but I couldn't reach him. There were no cell phones on those days, and the radio didn't work well, so I didn't reach the guy. And I realized at that moment that I had to make decisions on my own. On the one side of the telephone, there was the headquarters of the Israeli Air Force, and they told me that we need to make this attack on this house. And on the other end, I was alone in the squadron dealing with all the issues. So actually, I handed out tasks to the people who were in the squadron at that time. I instructed the air control unit to return all the helicopters back from the Golan Heights. Even though the squadron commander was there, I instructed them to go back without asking his permission. I gave instructions on how to arm the planes, which kind of missiles and so on by my own experience. I gave instruction to prepare the flight navigation maps. We didn't have GPS at that time. We had the maps, so everything was working well. And I wrote down the names of the pilots that will fly the attack on the board in the operation room. When the helicopters arrived from the training, everything was ready for the attack. The squadron commander saw the names. I remember this moment like it was yesterday. He saw the names, he reached the board, he deleted one of the names and put my name on the board instead of one of the people that I put on the board. And I had the opportunity to fly this attack. The flight left on time, the house in southern Lebanon was attacked, the helicopters returned to Israel safely. And I remember the feeling that I'm only 22, 23, doing all these things by myself, must take my decisions, my own decisions without anybody around me or surround me. And it was a great feeling to come back after a success attack. It's not that we like to attack anybody, but it was a great feeling that everything worked well. Another example, maybe, it was in 1990. I was appointed commander of the operational training course. It's OTU. Under my command were 6 helicopters and 10 young Israeli pilots. And I was only 24 years old. We went on a training flight in the Judea desert. If you're probably aware with this area, it's all very deep canyons and cliffs. And the goal was to attack missiles of the enemy. We were 4 helicopters, and I was the head of these all 4 helicopters during the flight. We reached the place that we were supposed to shoot the missiles. We were standing in a straight line, hovering over the canyon, and suddenly I heard a very loud bang. The helicopter turned 360 degrees in a tremendous speed. I couldn't see anything outside. I understood very fast that something happened here and that we have a malfunction in the helicopter. We started to fall down into the canyon. I did what a helicopter pilot is doing instinctively. It's doing the right things to save our lives, me and the co-pilot. And I even had the chance to transmit in the radio that we have an emergency landing. And actually, I succeeded to perform a nice and heavy landing on the side of a hill. It was like almost a surreal picture. It was the helicopter was standing on the cliff, maybe 150 meters down. There was nothing, and 1 meter forward or backward, we were totally dead. Actually, we were rescued from this point by another helicopter. We got to the hospital, everything was okay. But I can tell you that the statement, life has passed me by, it's a true statement. These are two examples from a very long military service. I think that the operational experience at such a young age, the opportunity to make decisions in real time, to take risks and make risk management, to work in teamwork. This education of the Israeli Air Force, the education actually of the Israeli Air Force is to do your best and a little bit more. It's to be excellent, and it's a huge challenge. It's a big competition. I'm sure that the people that are listening to us now, which are pilots like me, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And to stay human and to stay friend with your people at such a challenging environment is very difficult, but it's very important. So I brought with me to the police after I served in the Israeli Air Force for more than 10 years in total. I joined the police force in 1992. And I brought with me to the police the values from home, for my family, for my parents, for my Polish mother and my Israeli Sabra father, and the values that I gained in the Air Force. Actually, I joined the Israeli police as part of a team that set up the new aviation unit. And I think it was a natural move from the Israeli Air Force to the new and young Israeli police aviation unit. Just two short examples of my experience in the Air Force and how it actually affect the rest of my career in the Israeli police.
Well, thank you very much for that. It's really fascinating, Stefan. Just before I turn now to the police force and your career there and your decisions there, I just want to give the audience and those who are listening a little bit of information that they may not have to hand. First of all, in the state of Israel, everybody, with a few exceptions, but almost everybody drafts by way of a conscripted military service. So everybody, male and female, are drafted at the age of 18. In the case of men, I believe it's now 2.5 years of service. In the case of women, I believe it's now 2 years of service. But back when you were drafted, it was 3 years minimum for men and I believe 2 years minimum for women. And then you signed on, of course, and went above and beyond the requisite and became a pilot. And the other thing, ladies and gentlemen, just about this is you may have heard Alon mentioned his Sabra father. Now, I just want you to know that the Sabra, the term Sabra in Israel is synonymous with a fruit. It's a unique fruit that grows in the state of Israel, and it's prickly on the outside, almost like a cactus, but it's very soft and sweet on the inside. And so an Israeli born and raised is said to resemble the Sabra fruit, that it can be a little bit prickly on the outside, but you get beyond that and they're soft and gentle and caring on the inside. So that's what Alon's referring to when he says Sabra father. Now, let me ask you, there were certain decisions that you made in terms of your career as a member of the Israeli National Police, as an officer in the Israeli National Police, and there were actions that you decided proactively to take, and there were other actions that you decided and opportunities that you decided proactively not to take. So two sides of the coin of decision making. So I want to ask you to tell us a little bit about three of those and the emphasis that you placed within your career and finding the balance between family, career opportunities, and national duty and service. The first one is that you decided to become a station commander without necessarily having a background in that. You also decided to become the spokesperson for the Israeli National Police without having been on a pathway towards that, as I understand it. And for our listeners, to be a spokesperson for any major security presence within the State of Israel is to be a spokesperson for a body and an organization that has the eyes of the world trained upon its actions. And you also made a decision not to become the commissioner, the chief commissioner of the Israeli National Police. Tell us about those three, if you would.
Maybe I will start with that when I joined the Israeli police, I was a young ordinary Israeli man in the age of 25, 26. And I was on my way to migrate tour to India between the army service and the rest of my life. And in a coincidence, I joined the police force. Somebody told me that they are establishing a new aviation unit, and I thought that it's a huge opportunity. I forgot the tour to the trip to India, and I joined the Israeli police force. I can tell you that the beginning, when I just started to work in the Israeli Air Force, there were no helicopters. We just started to helicopter to Israel from the US yet. There were new helicopters. And I decided at that time, I know it sounds crazy and maybe weird, but I decided that at that time, I was 26, my first year in the police, I decided to become the commissioner. I know that it's crazy and it doesn't sound like a normal thing to do, but that was my decision. And I took two decisions actually. The first decision was to be the commissioner in many years to go. And the other one is that I will keep my family life normal and in a reasonable way. And I try to do that, and I will give you some examples. The decision to be the commissioner, it's something from the education that I got in the Israeli Air Force. It's to be the best I can be, and to do everything that I do in an excellent way. So I said to everybody that wanted to listen that I want to be the commissioner, but if I won't be the commissioner, everything is okay. I just pointed a goal, a very far away and high goal to achieve, and the whole path of my career was towards this goal. After several years in the police air unit, I did some things, some duties in the Israeli air unit. I decided that I need to break the glass ceiling and to move on. I left the air unit and moved to the position of the head of the operations at the Special Forces staff. I was the first pilot actually that left the aviation unit after a few years and joined I would say, the regular police as an officer. It was a very difficult decision to leave it's like a family. The aviation unit is like a family. You probably, our listeners know how it's to be in a squadron. It was to leave the familiar and the known and to move to something which is completely new, which is not familiar to me. This headquarters was a new headquarters. There were many opponents to this headquarters. And finally, I had to challenge all the high ranks staff of the police. I didn't fear from it. It was a great challenge, and eventually the headquarters was established, and it was a great unit. Years later, the head of the police operation division offered me to move on and to become a police station commander. You have to understand to be a police station commander is like the the goal of many police officers. It's almost it's the hardcore of the police to be a police station commander. That's the place where you give the service to the population. You meet eye and eye the crime and the evil and so on. So it was a surprise to the organization that the pilot is going to be a police station commander. But I had to think about it very quickly. I knew that it's going to be a big decision for me and my family. At the first, I said no. I decided not to be a police station commander at that time because I knew that it can cause turbulence to my family, and I decided to give up and to do it in maybe later on in my career. And actually, a few years later, when the time was right, I took on the role of police station, a very big police station in the central of Israel. I had 250 police officers under my command, a territory of more than 230,000 square kilometers. I worked with 11 local authorities, and it was a huge challenge. It was like learning a new language to speak, to write, and to hear, a new language, to be a pilot, to jump into this frozen ocean of the regular police, I can say. It was an unbelievable experience. I spent 3.5 years as the police station commander, and I think it was one of my best decisions. First, not to be a police station commander when it wasn't the right time, and second, to be a police station commander at the right time. And actually, it went very well. I think if I wasn't a police station commander, I wasn't able to be the deputy commissioner in the end. I kept moving from position to position, and one day the commissioner actually himself, I remember I was sitting at home getting a phone call from the commissioner. He called me and he offered me to be a commander of the sub-district of Eilat, which is the southern, you can see on the map behind Benjamin, it's the southern point on the map of Israel. Again, he told me good decisions are being taken fast. He wanted an answer immediately. And again, I put my family in the first priority. And even though that it was, people told me that it's crazy that I'm saying no, but again, I said no, and I said no, and I didn't take the job, even though that it was a promotion, and it wasn't the right time for me. The main idea here is that I think that everyone must take charge of his own career and do things on the right time, and not just being sucked into the turbulence when it's not the right time. And I said to myself that another opportunity would come. And indeed, the opportunity came. I was offered to be the police spokesman, as you just mentioned. As you said, I think there were two jobs that I did in the Israeli police force. One is the police station commander, and the other one is the spokesman, which were crazy jobs. It's 24/7. It's day and night. All the responsibilities on your head, and it's a huge challenge. And I knew nothing about the media, nothing at all. But as you probably already understand, a big challenge is not an issue for me, and I'm saying it because that's the truth. I jumped again to this frozen ocean, and I learned step by step how to deal with the media, how to deal with the journalists. And actually, I understood that this is the time to be proactive and not to respond all the time. If we are talking about leadership here and the command, I think this is a good example. I understood that all we are doing day after day is responding to the questions of the journalists. And again, as you said before, Benjamin, the spokesman is the face of the organization. I was sitting in the TV studios day and night, trying to explain what's going on in the police and why you did that and why you do the other thing. And eventually I understood that you have to be proactive. So I remember in those days, it was the beginning of the social media and the social networks. So I decided to establish a new media unit inside the spokesman division. I recruited people from the industry, people that are familiar with this new media issue and the social network. And we opened the Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and all the rest of the platforms of officially of the police. Today it sounds like obvious. In those days it was it was something new, and actually it made a revolution. It revolutionized the whole spokesman division state of mind. We started to talk with the public directly without intermediators between us and the public, and it was a tremendous change for all the police. About a year and a half ago, after I was a deputy commissioner, and after 26 years in the police, I decided to retire, as you probably know, and not run for commissioner. You asked me before why I decided not to become a commissioner, especially when I told you at the beginning that on my first day in the police, I decided to be a commissioner. So I can tell you that, again, it was family issues. It was after almost 35 years in uniforms. I felt that I need to do something else. I need to be creative again. I need new challenges. I think if you stay in one place too many years, it's not the right thing to do. And now, after 35 years in uniforms, I'm having my own company and doing my first steps in the business world. And actually, that's the main reason.
Well, thank you again for those. You know, there's this incredible theme that you're hitting on time and time again, Alon, which is the notion of being the right person in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, regardless of whether or not your experiences to that point have trained you for that specific moment. If you have the values of leadership, you can turn those values to multiple other avenues. And you seem to have done that very successfully. And for the listeners, I can tell you that to be the spokesperson for the Israeli National Police is very, very unique. The Israeli National Police deals with international terror, narcotics, domestic terror. It really does have the eyes of the international world and media trained very, very intensely upon it. And to be willing to step into that breach, if I can give a little bit of a comparison, it reminds me of the story of Nachshon, who went first into the Red Sea. We didn't know if it was going to part or not, but indeed, by stepping in and going almost neck deep in there, as we learn, the seas did indeed part, and we made it through to the other side, and that's leadership. Now, we're a little bit short on time, so I'm actually going to reduce it down to one last question, and I then want the faculty who are listening to this to ask their questions. So to those who are listening, please do use the chat box at the bottom of the Zoom screen or the Q&A section there. You'll see two icons, one for Q&A and one for chat. If you have a question, please do indicate it. It can be about anything the general spoke about, but also things he hasn't spoken about. He'll be happy to take your questions, but do not withhold when it comes to asking those questions. We really do want to learn from you by way of those. So please put a question in the Q&A or in the chat box, and we'll unmute your microphones and come to you after this final question that I have. So I want to ask a question that sort of coordinates or combines the two that I'd thought about, which is the complexity of the state of Israel. Israel is a complex, complex place. It's a state that oftentimes is called the Jewish state. It's also a state that is home to Muslims, to Arab Israelis, to Christians, to Druze, to the ultra-Orthodox members of the Jewish community, and to the secular members of the Jewish community. And it's now in a very complex time because we have the outbreak of the coronavirus. And there are hotspots around the country that are tied to specific demographics. So, for example, the perception is that there is more of an outbreak of COVID-19 among the ultra-Orthodox than among the secular. There was a greater outbreak of COVID-19 among some of the Israeli Arab communities than among the Israeli Jewish communities. The battle against the COVID-19 outbreak, Alon, is something that you directly stepped into. And it deals with really harnessing and corralling a very complex Israeli society and very varied around a common theme, which is overcoming this threat, this danger, and this virus, while preserving the social and religious considerations of different segments of Israeli society. How has that been worked on? What was your role in that? And if I may ask you, in the 2 to 3 minutes that remain here before we open it to questions, what made you leap back into that? You just said in your previous answer that you retired, and yet you proactively stepped into that battle. Why is that, please?
I think there are two questions here that are regarding the complexity of the state of Israel, which is a multicultural state and which is a big challenge by itself. And you are taking this multicultural state and this the tension in the country before the COVID-19. We had the 3 elections during or before the COVID-19 pandemic started, and you find the state of Israel in a very delicate position while the COVID-19 actually entered the borders of Israel. I think that the decisions that we're making at the beginning of the crisis were actually very good decisions, were very determined and fast decisions that were taken in the first wave of this crisis. But I can tell you from my point of view, I was a civilian actually, like many of us at that time. I just retired from the police with a lot of experience dealing with crisis management, and after many trainings and commanding this kind of events, from earthquake to storms to fire, huge fires, and also crisis concerning pandemic. I couldn't sit at home. I looked, and it was, I think, late January or maybe at the beginning of February, very early in this crisis. And I called a friend of mine, which was, he was the deputy of the, how do you say?
It was the deputy Ministry of Health, I think.
That's right, that's right. He was a deputy of the Ministry of Health. And I called him because I knew him before. We learned together at Harvard University a few years before. And I called him and I told him that I'm free and I'm coming to his office and I want to help him and the Ministry of Health, even though that I have no idea about diseases and viruses. All I know is about commanding, leadership, and dealing with crisis. So I just stepped into his office. I told him, here I am. Use me as much as you, use my knowledge and use my experience. And from this first appointment, actually, we worked together for almost 4 or 5 months. And I tried to help him to manage the crisis You have to, you probably understand that it's a process. We learn together what kind of a crisis it is. It just reached from China to Italy, from Italy to Israel, and there were 1, 2, 3 cases. But I knew that it will take a few weeks, that we will have hundreds of people sick, and the hospitals will be full, and we have to prepare. And the amazing thing about the pandemic, which is different from a regular war, that we or military operation, that here you cannot see the enemy. It attacks everyone, and it's everywhere, and all the government officials must cooperate together and to work together and to coordinate together to conquer or to try to deal with the crisis. And it's all matter, if I may say, it's all matter of leadership, knowing how to manage crisis, take risks, and very difficult decisions. So that's why I couldn't stay at home. I had to do something. I stepped into his office and I tried to help.
Well, thank you very much. You know, the questions are coming in thick and fast. We have several of them already.
I think it all based on trust between commanders and their pilots, and between pilots and between themselves. And this trust is based on honesty and saying the truth, especially when you are flying and risking your life and your partner's life. And maybe you're making mistakes, maybe he is making mistakes, and you coming back from the flight, and you have to, I think you call it debrief the flight. And if you won't say the truth, if you won't say exactly the truth, your debrief will be worth nothing, because you won't be able to improve to the next flight. And that's the basic of the things that the Israeli Air Force is leaning on. Telling the truth, trying to improve all the time. And I can tell you that I was flying with the commander. I was a very young pilot, and the commander of the all Israeli Air Force came to fly with me. He was flying with the squadron, but he visited the squadron, but he flew with me. And when we sat down to debrief, he told me, I did that wrong. I wasn't good in that. That was my mistake. And I was amazed as a young Israeli pilot to sit next to the Israeli Air Force commander. He is telling me things that he did wrong. And that's the basic for improvement and to be the best. I think we don't have enough time for such a great question. It can take me an hour just to answer, but I'll try. It's all along these 2 years that the commanders and those who train you are talking about leadership, commanding, and we do not train only for flying the helicopter or flying the jet. We train to win. We train to achieve our goals. We train to work together. And you even though that you are a very young pilot, you get duties which are not considered with the flights. For example, I was in charge in my squadron for the operational planning, and there is another one who is in charge of the education training. And we are pilots, but we are doing something else. We are doing also on job or during being a pilot is not enough. We are doing something else to train our commanding abilities, our decision-making abilities, and actually we manage the squadron. there is the commander, but we are doing everything else by ourselves. During these 2 years, of course, there are special sections that are dealing only and specifically with commanding and leadership. We do not fly for almost 8 months. We exercise like regular soldiers, long journeys in Israel, carrying people on our back, carrying our M16 and heavy weights on our back, and dealing with tremendous difficulties. And then you can understand who has leadership skills, who has commanding skills, and we change duties over the time. It's a long process.
So I just want to also, in the spirit of self-inquiry and self-critique, I've made an error here during the recording. I did not instruct Alon to stop the recording before the questions. So I want to give assurances to those who've already asked the questions. Those won't be reproduced in part or in full. Nobody will hear those questions. But I just want, Alon, could you stop the recording? That's okay. So there is another question here from Daniel, and Daniel has asked, do you think there is flexibility in timing for career advancements within the Israeli Air Force and police force? I appreciate the emphasis on saying no for family reasons. Was that difficult to say no? Also, well done on recovering the helicopter as a fellow helicopter pilot.
Thank you for that. During the time in the Air Force, actually, I didn't have the chance to say no. I only said yes. It was crazy 7 years. It's very, the structure is very precise. You finish the flying course, you are going to the squadron, you become a leader of or the commander of the OTU, and before you blinking your eyes, 7.5 years passed, and you are actually a civilian again. So I'm sorry for the noise. That's the Zoom issue here. People are living in this house, by the way. Just a minute, okay? Just a minute. Just a minute. My son just returned from the army, so the whole house is upside down. Anyway, to say no, I had the chance to say no only in my police service, and it was like I absolutely agree that it's very, especially when it's we got promoted.
Alon, I want you to repeat that because your reception went dead. You said you agreed to something. What did you say you agree on?
I said that I agree that to say no to a promotion is very difficult, and it's almost impossible. And I had nights without sleeping before I said no. But I think that if you're taking a decision at the beginning that your family comes first, and that you have other priorities, it makes things easier. Still, it's very difficult, but I believed in myself, and I knew that even though that I will say no now, I will have opportunities later.
So I want to read the question from our host today, the Colonel, who introduced this event. And the Colonel asks, can you share some thoughts and techniques for leading through challenges and difficult times? Specifically, how do we maintain morale during a crisis?
Thank you for the question. I think it's something that you learn along the way with a lot of experience dealing with a lot of people and a lot of issues that concerning decision making. I think that the main issue here, that it's all about the people. You cannot work alone. You cannot make anything by yourself. You need the people, the people around you, the people that that are under your command will do the things, or will do things not because you order them, but because they understand the necessity to do the things in the right way, and they will understand the logic behind your decisions. Everyone has his own commanding style, I can say. My style, my way of commanding is share the logic behind my decisions, to bring people to me closer, and try to make them understand why I took the decision. And another thing is to be, I hope that I say the right word, to be humble, not to use your ranks and to let people feel afraid from you. I'm sure that it's not the right way. They have to maybe how do you say, lechabed, to honor you, and
they have to respect you. They have to respect you.
But not to fear from you, because if they fear from you, they won't do anything, not for you and not for anything else. So it's all about the style, it's all about the people. And sometimes when you have to take difficult decisions, you have to be very calm and to take the decisions, even though that they sometimes not very popular.
So we've got time for one last question. I'm curious, you talked about how your 2 years of pilot training focused first on being an officer and second on being a pilot. Can you offer a time during that training when that priority became clearly evident to you? Maybe a time when you let being a pilot become the priority over being an officer, and how you were made aware by your instructors that you had your priorities mixed up.
I hope that I understand the question, but I think probably you mean when we made the shift between the issue of commanding and leadership to being a great pilot, okay, or
but also, if ever you failed to make that, if ever you got the priorities confused, and how were you told that they'd been confused?
I think it's very clear that it goes hand in hand. And being a professional pilot, nobody will, how do you say, nobody will let you do mistakes during flights. But they will not let you being a pilot without being a leader and without being a commander. So it goes hand in hand. At the beginning, when you're very young, they have to teach you the basic of flight or the basics of being a pilot, but they emphasize on shaping to become a commander and a leader. Because when you are young, that's the time that they can try to shape your leadership skills and commanding skills. When you're older, when you are 24, 25, you have to remember that pilots in Israel are keeping on flying as a reserve, not only when they finish their second assignment. So it shifted from commanding and leadership to professional pilots. And then after they shape, or maybe try to shape your skills as a commander or leadership, it shifted into the flight skills. I'm not sure that I did any mistake with that. It was very clear to me that you have to be a leader, and you have to be a good pilot at the same time.
Thank you very much.